The Temple of Solomon, the impossible wonder of the ancient world, 30 meters tall, 27 tons of pure gold covering its walls, 8-meter bronze columns, each weighing over 34 tons, walls paneled with cedar imported from Lebanon, floors of polished cypress and colossal cherubim over 4 meters high, covered entirely in gold leaf. Solomon's temple wasn't just a building, it was a statement, a divine masterpiece, unmatched in beauty, precision, and cost. For 7 long years, thousands of men labored day and night, creating what many call the most advanced architectural project of the ancient world. It consumed more gold, more manpower, and more resources than any known structure of its time. But behind the beauty lies a mystery that still confounds modern engineers. How was it even possible? Because some of the foundation stones weighed up to 400 tons. That's the weight of 60 adult elephants, moved, carved, and positioned 3,000 years ago, with no cranes, no pulleys, and no modern tools. How? Even today, no one truly knows. In the impossible foundation, Solomon refused ordinary stones. The scriptures say he ordered only large and costly stones to be used. Archaeologists examining the area where the Second Temple once stood found remains of blocks of unimaginable size, some over 400 tons. To extract them, 80,000 men worked in quarries scattered through the mountains near Jerusalem. They rose before dawn, walked for hours, and faced one of the most dangerous jobs on earth, because you couldn't just strike the rock and hope it broke cleanly. These stones needed to be perfect. And according to 1 Kings 6:7, no sound of iron tools could be heard at the temple site. That meant every cut, every surface, every corner had to be finished before the stones ever left the quarry. The technique they used was ancient but ingenious. First, they scored the limestone with harder stones. Then, they drilled a line of small holes and inserted dry wooden wedges. When the wedges were soaked with water, the wood expanded, slowly, silently, until the rock split cleanly along the line. No explosions, no hammering, only the deep, hollow sound of stone giving way to pressure. Each block then had to be shaped and polished with precision. Skilled workers, stone masters, followed mysterious markings engraved directly on the rock. These symbols indicated where each stone would go once it reached Jerusalem. There were no blueprints, no paper drawings. The codes were written in stone. A single mistake could ruin months of work. If one angle was off, a 400-ton block became useless. And in the quarries, mistakes could mean death. Collapses were frequent. Massive stones slipped and crushed workers. There were no safety measures, no hospitals, and often no burial. Still, the work never stopped. The brutal transport. Once the stones were ready, the real nightmare began. Transporting them across mountains and valleys, 70,000 men were assigned to this alone. They built massive earthen ramps, rolled the stones over thick tree trunks, and tied them with ropes as thick as a man's arm. Hundreds of men pulled in rhythm, commanded by overseers shouting, "Pull! Stop! Reset!" Progress was painfully slow, sometimes just a few inches a day. A single block could take weeks to move 5 kilometers, and when ropes snapped, and they often did, disaster followed. The sudden shift in weight crushed men instantly. The stone would slide backward, unstoppable, flattening everything in its path. There were no compensations for the dead. They were replaced the next morning. Israelite workers rotated monthly. 1 month working, 2 resting. But the Canaanite slaves had no rest at all. They pulled until their bodies failed, and then others took their place. And yet, stone by stone, the impossible foundation began to rise. The silent construction. Once the materials reached Jerusalem, another challenge awaited. Absolute silence. The rule was sacred. No iron tools, no hammering, no chiseling at the site. The Temple Mount was holy ground, and the sound of metal was considered impure. Every stone had to fit perfectly on arrival. If even a finger's width was off, they had to move the block back, realign the rollers, and try again, all without a single clang of iron. Hundreds of men worked in complete silence. Only the creak of wood, the scrape of rope, and the slow grinding of stone against stone echoed across the valley. Supervisors watched every movement, ready to punish any mistake. Disobedience meant lashes, reduced rations, sometimes worse, and somehow, against all odds, the structure grew. Quietly, flawlessly, the cedar from Lebanon. But the stones were only half the story. Solomon needed the finest cedar from Lebanon, a wood so prized that only kings could afford it. He made an alliance with King Hiram of Tyre. Hiram would supply the cedar and skilled Sidonian lumberjacks in exchange for vast quantities of grain and olive oil, millions of liters each year. Every month, 10,000 men traveled north to Lebanon. They worked side by side with the Sidonians, felling ancient trees that had stood for centuries. The logs were bound together into giant rafts and floated down the Mediterranean Sea to the port of Joppa, what we now know as Tel Aviv. From there, they were hauled overland to Jerusalem, another 60 kilometers uphill. The journey was long, harsh, and often deadly. Workers slept outdoors, ate simple bread and lentils, and suffered fevers, exhaustion, and accidents. Many never made it home. But still, the cedar arrived, one log at a time, the gold of the temple. And then came the most dazzling phase, the gold. 27 tons of pure gold lined the interior walls, floors, ceilings, and sacred objects. The man in charge was Hiram of Tyre, a master craftsman in bronze and gold. He supervised furnaces burning day and night, melting gold that was then hammered into thin sheets. Artisans beat and polished each sheet by hand until it shone like mirrors. Inside the Holy of Holies, every surface glittered. Walls, ceiling, and floor, all covered in pure gold. 2 giant cherubim, each 4.5 meters tall, spread their wings across the chamber. Every detail, every object, from the altar of incense to the chains and lampstands, was crafted with perfection. The heat was unbearable. The fire roared constantly. Men worked in shifts, drenched in sweat, hands burned, faces blackened by smoke. Yet they continued day after day, transforming raw metal into divine beauty. Divine coordination. Over 150,000 workers, 3,300 supervisors, and 550 chief officers coordinated this massive project. Each man had a role, each team a task. Communication had to be flawless. One delay in the quarries could stop the carpenters. One mistake in the furnaces could halt the gold plating. And yet, in 7 years and 6 months, without modern tools, without machines, they finished. The glory descends. When the last stone was set, the temple stood as a beacon of light, gleaming across Jerusalem. It wasn't just a building, it was a symbol of divine perfection. During its dedication, all Israel gathered. The priests brought the Ark of the Covenant inside, and as Solomon prayed, something extraordinary happened. A cloud filled the temple, so thick, so radiant, that the priests could no longer stand. 1 Kings 8:10-11 records it. The glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord. The presence of God had descended. Tens of thousands had died in quarries, under stones, at sea, or by fire. But those who survived watched in awe as the temple they built with blood and sweat became the dwelling place of the Almighty. Solomon offered 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep in sacrifice, a final tribute to the greatest construction ever achieved by human hands. And so, the Temple of Solomon stood, a silent monument to faith, power, and mystery. A wonder that defied logic and that even today no one has been able to rebuild.